Support for Arkansas Week provided by the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, the Arkansas Times, and Little Rock Public Radio.
Hi, everybody. I'm Donna Terrell for Arkansas Week. Parkinson's disease is a progressive disorder that affects the nervous system, causing uncontrollable movements. Unfortunately, there is no cure. It came as a disbelief for Olympian and retired professional runner Frank O'Mara, who was diagnosed with early onset Parkinson's disease at the age of 48. That was in 2009. It has been a journey of challenges, and as you saw there, he is with us today to share his uplifting story, which is documented in his recent book, Bend, Don't Break, a memoir of endurance. Frank O'Mara, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Donna.
You know, I'm going to get into the book, but I just want to reintroduce you to Arkansans who some of them remember, and for some it's all new to them, but you are a former Razorback in track and field. That was during what years?
I don't know if I want to admit that to you now, but it was 1980 to 83. I was the first NCAA champion for John McDonald. There was one before me, Clyde smack over Scott in 1948 for an NCAA title. But I won the first one at John McDonald in 1983.
That's pretty amazing. And you're also, I mean, you have many accolades, but one of them being three-time Olympian.
This is the season for the Olympics, and I went to 84, 88, and Barcelona, and I enjoyed it tremendously. It was an accomplishment I wanted to make.
Yeah, pretty amazing. And we all remember Alltel. In fact, I remember, Frank, when I moved here 20 years ago, Alltel was still in its heyday. It was before it was bought by Verizon, but Alltel is you know, a lot of people work there, and you were one of the executives to help lead that company during its heyday.
Well, it was just tremendously successful. We're the fifth largest wireless carrier in the United States. We're the largest geographic network, covering more square miles than anybody else. And it was a great place to work.
Yeah.
People still talk about the comradeship and the spirit of the place.
Yeah, it's beautiful. There are lots of memories of Alltel, and people should know that you have degrees from the U of A in engineering, business, and law. Very, very educated, smart, and competitive man you are.
That's how I kept my visa to stay in the country when I was running. I stayed in school.
And we have to point out, you are from Ireland. You came here from Ireland to go to U of A and become a Razorback.
That's precisely right. I came, three Irish guys came the same year, and we thrived. It was a wonderful place for us.
You sure did thrive, and you're still here, and we appreciate that. I want to get into this book, but first let's just talk about the diagnosis. You're now 48 years old. You lose your job with Alltel because it closed, because it was bought and sold. And then a week later, you get a diagnosis I'm sure you never dreamed you would get.
Well, I tried to avoid it for a long time. I had a problem with my walking and my running. And I did physiotherapy, massage therapy, chiropractic care, all anything but seeing a neurologist. Mm-hmm. And I dedicated both to my neurology team.
Dr. Archer.
And Dr. Dhall. Mm-hmm. And I regret ever having to meet a neurologist, but I've met many, and they're all great people. But I put it off as long as I could.
Yeah.
And my first foray into neurology was that I thought I might have spinal stenosis. But the truth came out that I had Parkinson's.
Yeah, you know what interested me when I was reading the book was when you talked about specifically Dr. Archer and going to see him, and You know, you just figured that maybe it was a running injury because you've had those before, so many times before. But I think deep down inside you knew something was wrong. But what was really interesting in this book was the minute you walked in the door, Dr. Archer really was able to tell what was wrong with you. He knew, based on how you were walking, your poses, all of that, that it was likely Parkinson's.
There's some tests you do where you move the hand to speech, you keep the speed up and making fists and finger tapping like this. But he knew from the way I turned around, the way I sat, I had slowness of movement that was very obvious to the trained eye.
You know, it's interesting too, you said that when you went home, I mean, you were still in denial, but there was a part of you, according to your book, there was a part of you that realized that, well, if it isn't Parkinson's disease, then it's something, and it could be much worse than that.
Yeah, there are mine is a life sentence, I'd like to say, or a chance of parole. Other things, as you know well, can be a death sentence.
Yeah.
So I don't have the worst of it, but I do have to cope with it as best I can.
Yeah. And that's where you said in this book, and you just said it, while Parkinson's diagnosis isn't a death sentence, it is a life sentence with no chance of parole. Yeah.
It's the fastest growing neurodegenerative disease in the world. And there are over 40 different symptoms. Mine are cramping and rigidity. Speech obviously is a problem for me. But others have tremors, all kinds of problems. And
you know, and right now is probably a good time to talk about the deep brain stimulation, because we see video of you before you had that and the uncontrollable movements. And now as I sit here and I talk to you, it seems to me you have much more control. Yeah,
deep brain stimulation has been around for a while, but it scares off most people because it's such an extreme response. They drill 2 holes in your head and put electrodes deep into your brain. They attach it to an impulse generator, and you run voltage through your brain at all times.
Yeah.
And your movement is sort of specialist. You can change the frequency, change the amplitude.
How long will that last? Is that indefinite, or do you have to get that procedure again?
I don't know, to be truthful with you. Okay. I tend to ignore things that don't suit me. You know, it's good. I learned that in boarding school. I compartmentalize. I'll worry about that tomorrow.
Compartmentalize. That's in your book. And you learn that, though, in boarding school, how to compartmentalize.
Well, it's about discipline and setting aside different times and day for different things. And you have to learn that in boarding school to survive.
Yeah.
But it's also in the Irish nature. Reference Scarlett O'Hara, an Irish last name O'Hara, and she says she'll worry about that tomorrow. That's why I'll worry tomorrow.
Worry about that tomorrow.
Yeah.
You know, an amazing life, though. An amazing life, even with Parkinson's disease. I credit, in the book, when you talk about your travels to Antarctic and your journey there, it's absolutely amazing to see you out there. But I go back to when you were a track star and being an Olympian and that competitive spirit of yours. What made you want to go to Antarctic?
Well, I was at a pub when I was too young by a guy who was on an expedition with Shackleton called the South Pole. I followed up with there when I was about 15. And I was fascinated with a lot of pictures of with the hoods up and the cold. And so I always wanted to go there. Yeah. And with Parkinson's, you need goals, you need objectives.
Goals and objectives.
Yeah,
yes.
And without those, I would fall apart.
Okay.
So a goal has to be something that not everybody can or will do. And if a place is worth going to, it's hard to get to.
Yeah,
So,
it is very hard to
yeah.
get there. That's amazing. Yeah, and you said here, I have always been fascinated with polar exploration ever since my childhood. So that's pretty amazing. We'll talk a little bit more about that. We're going to take a bit of a break, and we'll be right back. We continue our conversation on Parkinson's with Frank O'Mara, and we're joined now by Dr. Rohit Dhall, Chair of Neurology and Director of the Parkinson's Foundation Comprehensive Care Center at the University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences. Thank you so much for joining us in this conversation. Are you seeing an increasing number of people with Parkinson's disease, and especially like in Frank's case, at a young age? Because from everything I've read, usually if it's going to happen, it's after 60.
Parkinson's, the incidence of Parkinson's, new diagnosis of Parkinson's appears to be increasing across, not just in the United States, but also internationally. The proportion of people who are young at the time of diagnosis has held constant. It's about 5% of people who are diagnosed, between 5 and 10% before the age of 50. But the total incidence is increasing, both in young people and in older people. And we think that part of it might be better recognition, better awareness about the disease. Part of it might be that there are environmental factors that are kind of working their way through the demographics that we have, and part is the aging of the overall population.
You know, I want to talk about the book again and talk about Frank. You made a dedication of this book. You said, "I wish I had never met a single neurologist or neurosurgeon." No offense to you, Dr. Dhall, but 14 years into this saga, I have the contact details for many. This book is dedicated to all of them. And you mentioned several doctors at UAMS, including Dr. Dhall, and then you mentioned some other doctors. But what really struck me was when you said, without your care, many of us would not have the tools to cope. So are we talking both physically and mentally?
I have to be careful what I say now, because Dr. Dhall could correct me. But I feel that Parkinson's hasn't had much improvement in its treatment for 30 years. Still taking the same medicine we've taken that into time. But also, get my voice sorted out, but also save me, Donna.
I am, and hold that thought, Frank. So what am I seeing here when he's trying to speak and tell me what he's feeling or his thoughts? What's happening here?
Annoyed.
I think, yeah, so, you know, this arrest of being able to get words out, this speech arrest, and sometimes we see similar things with walking where people are trying to walk or turn and get stopped up in their spot. These are features of freezing of speech, freezing of walking that are incredibly distressing for many of my patients. And it is, for somebody as eloquent as Mr. O'Mara, I know he has an exact sequence of what he wants to get out.
Yeah, and that has to be frustrating. That has to be frustrating for any patient. I know Frank has had the deep brain stimulation. How has that helped him? And how does that help people in general with Parkinson's?
So I don't know if I have your permission to share.
You do.
Thank you. I remember when I initially met Mr. O'Mara, he had a lot of what are called motor fluctuations, ups and downs in control of his Parkinson's symptoms, where in the down times, and you shared some videos, I remember, and you shared this incredible chart of how your day was like. You were going through this essentially a yo-yo of when things are working well, you have better control of your movements, but really problematic dyskinesia or abnormal involuntary movements. And then when your meds were off or in the mornings before you started your day, you had terrible dystonia and spasms that essentially held all of your body in the grip of dystonia. So I remember those days. I know you do.
Too.
You share parts of those in your book.
Yeah.
Really short amounts of good on time where you were able to do things and you tried to make the best of it. There was this sense of pressure. I think you still feel that sense of pressure to make sure that you're doing well with the amount of good on time that you have.
Your days brought up medicine is absorbed, it runs out. Medicine runs out. It's called an off period.
Yeah.
And off periods were really hard.
Yeah.
On periods you have to do what you can while you can.
Do what you can while you can. What should people look for? Because I'm sure watching this program, a lot of people would wonder, well, can this happen to me? Is it hereditary? Is there something in the diet? Is there a way to prevent it? What can you tell folks in terms of the likelihood of people getting it and what they can do?
Parkinson's, the risk of it goes up with age. So in some ways, if you're lucky and survive into your 60s, the risk of having Parkinson's when you're about 60 years of age is about 1%. If you live into your 80s, the risk goes up to 4 or 5%. So the older you are, the greater the risk. There are hereditary factors.
More men than women?
Men have a higher risk of developing Parkinson's. There are some racial features as well.
When you say racial, white, black, what?
Whites have a higher risk than blacks. Asians probably, again, depending on where they're from, may have, there are certain pockets that have a higher risk. And we don't fully understand some of those risks. Genetic factors that affect certain populations and not the others.
And I know Frank told me that he didn't have a family history. He was 48 years old when he was diagnosed. Let's talk a little bit about the foundation, the Comprehensive Care Center over at UAMS. You are the head of that, from what I understand. So what are the benefits of that foundation?
So we are one of the centers of excellence for managing Parkinson's. There are about 40 centers in the country that are designated by the Parkinson's Foundation to both recognize the excellence of clinical care, research, and education outreach and support that is happening at these centers. We at the university take care of about a third of the population in the state with Parkinson's. We estimate there's about 5,000 or so people with Parkinson's living in Arkansas. We take care of about 1,500 of them. In addition, we have support and education and outreach services that reach the entire state. Whether you're a patient of the UMS clinic or not, you can still utilize the education, outreach, and support services. When we brought the designation of the Parkinson's Foundation Comprehensive Care Center, it freed up some resources for programs like Art for Parkinson's, music in neurodegenerative disorders, group
Are all
exercise.
those things important, though, in terms of therapy? When you talk about art, and that just reminded me of something, and you looked at me, Frank, like, oh, wait a minute, she needs to ask me about this. You have done artwork, beautiful artwork.
Well, I don't know if it's beautiful or not, but one of the problems with Parkinson's, the solitude. You're left inside your own head a lot of the time. So the company is as important as the activity. It really is. Because you end up at home by yourself all day. You don't talk, so your voice gets worse. You don't walk, so your balance gets worse. And you don't stimulate your brain with activities. So it's crucial.
So did you do art before Parkinson's, or the art came after Parkinson's?
Art came after Parkinson's.
Okay.
But I was a civil engineer by training, so I'm used to drawing. But the art, it's just a bunch of colour. I hope the lights come from the right direction.
So there is something to be said for art therapy with Parkinson's disease.
There's something to be said. You put it really eloquently. There's social deconditioning, there's cognitive deconditioning that goes on. If you have Parkinson's, you want to be in a safe space with others where you can express yourself. People talk about not being able to express yourself physically. And so what we're trying to do is highlight abilities rather than the disability that Parkinson's brings.
I love that. You know, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about warning signs for Parkinson's. You know, after I was reading Frank's book, as we discussed, Bend Don't Break, a memoir of endurance, he describes very well some of the symptoms and what was happening when he was running, and at first he had problems. He recognized the problems during a run, and then eventually he would recognize the problems as you would walk. So explain, are the symptoms, do they vary with different people, or are they pretty much the same? What should we look for?
So the premonitory symptoms, the kind of before the motor symptoms of Parkinson's, people may have all sorts of things. They may have issues with acting out their dreams. They may have issues with a reduced sense of smell, constipation.
Acting out their dreams, I'm not understanding you.
So God gave us this ability to paralyze our body when we're in a dream state.
Okay.
And that mechanism, well, God or our brains, that mechanism does not work very well in degenerative disorders that are caused by a misfolded protein called alpha-synuclein, where the body is not paralyzed in a dream state, and so people act their dreams out. That may happen years to decades before the motor symptoms of Parkinson's: slowness, stiffness, tremor, walking changes. The common motor symptoms of Parkinson's, though, are either slowness or stiffness of one side of the body, with or without a tremor.
Okay. So when we see people who, I noticed some people as they get older, they shake a lot. Is that an early sign?
So shaking or tremor can happen because of a number of different reasons. Okay. Often there's a condition called essential tremor, where there's tremor with the use of the hands. In Parkinson's, tremor often is at rest as well as with the use of the hands.
Okay. What about research? Where have we come with that? Are we making inroads? We always talk about different diseases and fundraisers and things like that, which I want to talk with you a little bit too, Frank, about that before we end this segment. But what's happening in the way of research? Are there any breakthroughs?
So research into Parkinson's, the work towards a cure for Parkinson's, is my personal passion. That's what I am excited about. We've made a tremendous amount of inroads into understanding the biology of Parkinson's. We know many of the genetic risk factors that are informing whether somebody's going to have Parkinson's or not. We understand the pathology and the spread of it in the brains of people with Parkinson's, and that is translating into finding new medicines and clinical trials. I've been working on ways to slow Parkinson's progression. I say we are the group of researchers looking at ways to slow Parkinson's progression. I've been working on this for a long time. And we have yet to find the first medicine that is able to slow progression. We know exercise slows progression, but a pill or a shot that I could give somebody that would slow Parkinson's progression. In the time that I've been at UMS now, there are going to be 4 medicines that we help develop at UMS through clinical trials that are going to be released in the next year that I'm aware of, that are likely going to be coming to the market for symptoms of Parkinson's.
Is it anything that Frank would be eligible to take at this point?
I think we are careful with medications because, again, if it's not broke, let's not try and mess it up. It's taken a lot of
hear that,
calibration.
Frank? If it's not broke, we're not going to mess it up. Well
said, Frank.
Frank, I do want to ask you. I think we have about a minute left. There's more. I mean, you've gone to the Antarctic. You've journeyed that, which is amazing. But there are other things you want to do too.
Well, I want to create a game to fundraise for Parkinson's, much like the Ice Bucket Challenge for ALS a few years ago. So we're working on that right now.
Okay, I think that's great. When you look at him, what do you think, Dr. Dhall?
Well, I'm really, really humbled and proud. I think, Ms. O'Meara, thank you for spreading the word. Thank you for what you're doing. I know it takes a tremendous amount of effort. And I think both your optimism and perseverance, we really need to take a note of that.
And we do appreciate your being here and sharing your story with us and your wonderful book, Bend Don't Break, a memoir of endurance. This is a great read. Look for this book. I'm sure you can get it online. You can get it in the bookstores. Everywhere books are sold.
Both. Yeah.
Both. Okay, we will do that. And Dr. Dhall, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for spreading the word.
And I want to thank you for joining us for Arkansas Week. I'm Donna Terrell. Make it a good week. We'll see you next time.
Support for Arkansas Week provided by the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, the Arkansas Times, and Little Rock Public Radio.